Right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, in today's episode, we interview Summit Strength client Heather, and she talks through her story and her experience training through Summit Strength for her hiking adventures. Now, the awesome thing about Heather's story is at some stage during her training, she did have a bit of a disappointing experience on the trail. But full credit to her, she used this experience as a launching pad to get back into her training, to really ramp things up, to really take the long-term approach and turn things around, and ultimately get back out on the trail feeling great, feeling confident, and seeing some great success. So not only is this a great story of just learning a little bit about someone's journey through the Summit Strength, but also maybe a great inspiration for anyone who may have had a bit of a poor experience on the trail and feeling like their confidence or their physical abilities isn't quite where they need it to be. So with that being said, let's get into this episode. I really think you're going to enjoy it, and it's an absolute great one. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith, and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare, and conquer your upcoming hike, trek, or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude, and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable, and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. All right, hello, Heather, and welcome to the show. How are you going today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And as I was sort of saying before, before we started recording, I think it's going to be so awesome to have a bit of a chat through, your story, what you've been going through recently. Just because I really do think from what you're about to say, I assume it's going to resonate with quite a few people. And I know often these type of journeys, it can be sometimes tough when we're kind of going through our own thing. We don't really feel like any people understand or going through similar struggles or whatever it may be. So I just feel like you telling this story and other people in other situations telling their stories on this is just such an awesome thing. So I'm really looking forward to this. So I guess to kick things off and just give a bit of a starting point for today, do you just want to let us know and let the listeners know where you're from, what do you do, and what is your background in hiking?
Sure. I am from a small town in Washington State, in the U.S. And my background with hiking is I started hiking before I had children, just a little bit, kind of got into it. And then I had my daughter who's 14, and we kind of stopped hiking just because we had small children. And so I picked it back up again about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and got really serious about it, and just really fell more in love with it than I was previously to it. And so I typically hike every weekend. And so I'm just kind of trying to do harder hikes now, but just kind of enjoying hiking every weekend is kind of my background right now with it.
Absolutely. And then I guess over the last short term, whether it's months, last year, or whatever it may be, what specifically have you been training for with your hiking?
I've been training for Colchuk Lake hike. It's near me, a couple hours away, but it's in the Enchantments, which is a mountain range here in Washington, that's very popular for hiking and through hiking, backpacking, that kind of thing. But Colchuck is at the very beginning of the Enchantments, which is like 22 miles long, like that stretch. So I just hit the very start of it, but it was really beautiful.
Yeah. And out of curiosity, what was the inspiration for this specific section of trail? Was there anything that really made it jump out at you?
I've seen pictures on a lot of the Facebook pages, the hiking pages, local hiking pages that I follow. And it just looked really gorgeous, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes. It also, I was inspired just with my hiking every weekend. I was inspired by my hiking partner and friend. She does mountain climbing, which I don't do. But we hike together every weekend, and she kind of inspired me to set a goal because she had set some big goals for herself. And so I thought, I've seen this lake. It looks gorgeous. At the time that I set the goal, I wasn't physically ready for it. So that's why I, joined your training company to just help me get ready, physically ready, because I wanted to feel physically ready and be able to enjoy the hike and not be like hating life on the trail because I've been on trails like that. So I just wanted to enjoy it. So I set the goal and then started training for it.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that then. So tell us a little bit about the training that you've been through with Summit Strength. Like what was included in your program? What did it look like? Yeah, give us the rundown.
Yeah, I started training with you about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, a year and a half, I think, maybe. But the training consisted of usually 4 days a week, 2 days strength training, and then 2 days cardio. And then I always hiked on the weekend, so that was part of my training as well. Um, but I think the exercises that I was doing leading up to this hike definitely helped me be ready for the trail, because I was able to communicate with Andrea about the terrain that I would be covering to get to Colchuck, and so we added in some specific exercises to help me with that.
Yeah. And just for context for people listening, so Andrea is one of our coaches at Summit Strength, and she's been on the podcast a few times actually as well. So she was who was directly working with Heather here. So I guess as you're coming through this process, and obviously it was a long-term journey. Thinking back, were there any particular, I guess, sessions, workouts, exercises, or anything like that you found most challenging for yourself?
Most challenging, I think, were some of the cardio things. I've had some struggle with just feeling like huffed and puffed on the uphill sections of a lot of the trails here in Washington. There are not very many flat ones. So typically you are going, up and up, and it feels like you're never going down until you're returning on the hike. So I did a lot of like hill climbing exercises, some of the elliptical like 30-30s really I felt like helped me, and definitely like we added some box steps. I'm not sure if that's the correct term for the exercise, but where you step up on a box kind of over and over. At first, I was like, this is really boring. But once I got into it and I got used to it, it definitely helped.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for context, like, yeah, box steps, step ups, like potato, it has a few different names. And yeah, that workout for listeners it's not very exciting. It's very, very simple, but it's basically finding a step it up and down for extended periods of time, but breaking it up with some intervals and sometimes changing up the weights or the speed or whatever it may be. It is very, very, very repetitive, but with intentionally of just sort of like overloading those muscles of doing the same thing again and again and again and again. So yeah, as you sort of said, is a bit boring. It's not something we kind of want to do months and months and months of sometimes, but definitely effective if you can stick with it. So there you
Yeah.
go.
We added it in kind of toward the end. So like as I was getting closer to when my scheduled hike was coming. And so it wasn't something that I was doing the entire time that I was training, but more toward the end. And I did notice a lot of the strength training workouts that I've done just on even my average hikes, not this specific hike, but I mean, of course it helped me on this hike too, but on all of my hikes, the strength training really has helped me with my balance too. And like, when you step on those, wet roots or those loose rocks, just having more ability to balance myself and not feel like I'm going to fall has really been a big growth area as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the feedback I get from anyone who ever does the enchantments or any part of the enchantments is just like the terrain is rougher than they expected, and there's like as you sort of said, steps and rocks and this and that, and there's constant challenges, and it seems like it's a pretty common theme for a lot of people. So yeah, well, great that the strength training made a difference there, and I guess beyond that, was there anything else that you found, I guess, particularly beneficial through all your workouts, all your training in other situations?
I think that it was kind of the mental training, I think for me was like the hardest. I had scheduled to do this hike like last summer or the year before, so a year ago. And I postponed it because I had had a hike where it just mentally got me, and I ended up with like heat stroke. I was feeling sick on the way out. So, kind of mentally, just the trail was very rocky, very rooty. And I just didn't feel when I was on the trail and almost done with that trail, I ended up turning around because I just felt um, kind of defeated by the trail, more mentally and physically. I was just so exhausted. And so I ended up postponing my Colchuck hike because of that hike. And so I worked a lot through your module about like mental, kind of upping my mental game. And so I think that helped me as well on this trail to be able to accomplish this hike.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit more about that then. So I guess as general, like how did you kind of bounce yourself back after, obviously a disappointing situation, and you mentioned some of the mental resources there. Was there anything specific you put into action out of those?
I really tried on this hike. Like I had mentioned before, I really didn't want to be physically like tired. I knew it was going to be a really hard hike. But I had been training. I had done, some other harder hikes, but not at this level. And so I had done one the weekend before, and the terrain was very rough. And I thought, okay, if I can do this one, I can for sure do Colchuck, even though the elevation was lower. And so I did that one. And so going into this one, I was just thinking about the module about like mental strength. And I just kind of thought, I'm just going to try to live in the moment. And so I didn't really think about like what was ahead on the trail because I knew once we got past some of the bridges that it was going to start getting pretty difficult. And so I tried to just take one step at a time. I just tried to kind of be in the moment, not think about the trail that I just did, not think about the trail that's ahead of me. And I feel like that worked for me on this hike. Like the very end, I was thinking, where is the lake? Like, are we almost there? And I was starting to get a tad tired, but not where I've been on other hikes. So I feel like just being in the moment really helped and not thinking about the previous moment or the next moment to come.
Hmm. Okay, and then I guess going back to the training, and obviously, there was the big sort of roadblock in the sense of the hike, which didn't go so well. But aside from that, through this sort of training journey, were there other roadblocks that sort of came up along the way, and if so, like what did you do about overcoming them?
I think definitely illness came up. Like I was supposed to hike earlier in September. I got sick a couple weeks in a row. And so that kind of postponed it. And then we weren't quite sure that we were even going to make it before the snow flew. So I think just like trusting, that Andrea was like, you've done all your training. Like, even though you were sick recently, I feel like you've done enough to be strong enough to do it. And so I kind of just went on faith of like, I've done a whole year and a half of training. I was down for a couple of weeks, but I kind of did a little light work the week before I went. And I mean, it worked. I wasn't overly tired. I felt strong enough. My legs didn't feel like overly tired. And so I think all of the work that I'd previously done really did get my legs and body in shape to be able to do the terrain that Colchuck entails. I mean.
Hmm. Well, tell us a little bit more about the trail then. Give us the whole rundown. Give us the trip report. How did it all go for you?
It was a lot of fun. We got there at like 4:30 in the morning. We had heard and been reading the trail reports that the trail was pretty busy, even early in the morning. A lot of people are going up Asgard Pass, which goes up Colchuck right there past the lake, and they're going into the core of the enchantments. So we started at 4:30. The trail was packed, like hundreds of people. I've never seen a trail packed like that. But we got there, we hiked in with headlamps initially, which I think helped because I couldn't see any of the trail except for where my feet were going. But Colchuck itself the whole trail is about 8 4.7 miles, about 2,342 elevation feet in those 4 miles. We ended up hiking 9 total miles. But I did use the strategies that are like in your program with just going very slow. I was trying to keep my heart rate like lower so that I wasn't really stressing my heart out, because I have had a problem with just getting my heart rate really high and then it's hard to get it back down. So we just went really slow. Like we were like, if it takes us all day, it takes us all day. But we just went really slow. I did kind of listen to my body, and we stopped twice just to, to eat carbs, because through my training process, I would just be on hikes and I would kind of hit a wall and be completely out of energy. So some of the strategies that your program has taught me is just to like add carbs to my water. So I've been using Tailwind into my electrolytes and the carbs. Is that the right term for it?
Yep.
Yeah. So just adding that to my water. And then when I started to feel a little bit tired, like just barely tired, we would stop for a food break, and not stop very long, like maybe a minute or two, just to eat something quick, and then just keep moving. And so it took us about 4 hours to get to the top, because we were trying not to take really any other breaks, like not stop at all, but just kind of keep moving, but very slow. And of course, we were pulling over off to the side of the trail to let the faster hikers by us. And a lot of the people that were trying to go very fast to get up Asgard Pass, they had a much longer distance to travel that day. So we were just, pulling aside to let them by. But when we got to the top, we were able to kind of watch the sun come up over the mountain and shine on the lake and make it this gorgeous green color. And we just drank coffee at the top and then sat there for a couple of hours and then hiked back down. And again, I ate a little bit on the way down, but we didn't have to stop. We just kind of kept moving down slowly. So overall, it was a really good hike. I felt like I didn't really get tired. My muscles didn't get fatigued. And mentally, I felt strong on this hike.
How good. How good. And then I guess sort of like, obviously that's the good stuff. Like, were there any particular, I guess, challenges or low points or anything you faced on the trail and while you're actually going along?
Not on this trail, thankfully. But I have been on other trails where I've definitely kind of hit roadblocks or felt really not positive about it. So that's kind of why I did all the training and tried to prepare as much as I could. I also had my pack. Normally my pack is about 20 pounds. But my friend carried like our emergency stuff. And then I carried just water and food. And so my pack was like less than 8 pounds. It was very light. So I, was lucky enough to have a friend who would carry some of my gear so that I didn't have to have that extra weight that I typically carry on our every weekend hikes.
Yeah, nice. And and I hope the friend got a nice treat at the end or something as a thank you, because it's such a great thing when someone can contribute like that.
Well,
Yeah,
it was
awesome.
her training for her hike that she's trying to do, her
Ah,
mountain climbing. So she didn't mind adding the extra weight.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that's perfect situation then, isn't it? Ah, how good. And then I guess like, okay, so talk through the trip, like after the hike, like when it was all done, how did you feel? What was going through your head? And yeah, what did you do to kind of, I guess, celebrate afterwards?
Yeah, I felt really good. I feel like we kind of celebrated at the lake, like when we got there, because, we weren't, my friend had said, if it's too hard and we get, halfway there, even if we don't make it, we'll just turn around and try it next year. So we kind of went into the hike with that kind of as a kind of cursor to the day. But I was definitely like, had my mindset on getting there. So I think we kind of just celebrated at the top, and it was fun just to see all of the other hikers just kind of celebrating, reaching the lake and then continuing if they were continuing on. But I think I felt like we celebrated there with just having a treat of coffee at the top. And once we got back, we kind of just celebrated in the car and just talked about kind of the journey that I had taken to try to be ready for it and train. And so we just kind of talked about how it couldn't have been a more perfect experience and hike for that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess looking forward now with this behind you, what's the plan of attack for the hiking moving forward? Is there anything else on the agenda or anything else you're considering at this stage?
Definitely going to keep training just because I feel like if you stop training, you just lose all of the progress that you've already made. And so I haven't yet set a new goal hike, but I definitely will be doing that soon. I do want to get into some backpacking next summer, so I haven't done any of that yet. So kind of trying to explore backpacking a little bit coming up next summer.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. And I guess sort of looking at with this behind you, like if anyone else was considering this particular adventure or hiking in a similar area or a similar type of trail, what advice would you give them? Like looking back.
I definitely think you need to like do your diligence to be research the trail, research the terrain. Just so that you're safe because it is important to be safe on trail. And so if you're not quite ready for the terrain because you haven't done your research, that can make it dangerous. So just making sure that you've, done your research, that you've, feel mentally and physically ready, and to know like if you're out on trail and you get on a trail and you're not physically ready, it's okay to turn around and do that trail again when you feel ready for it. But I definitely think doing strength training and some cardio training um, definitely helps be more physically fit so that you can do the kind of trails that you want to do and the kind of places you want to explore.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, fantastic, Ella. Fantastic. And I guess before we sort of come to the end of this episode today, was there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything else we kind of missed today, or anything else you'd sort of like to pop in here while we're on the show?
I think that it's just really important for every person to be able to enjoy nature. So just of any kind of fitness level, I am not a sports person. I didn't really work out before I started training for hiking. I had just kind of jumped back into hiking and really loved it. But really wanted to be more fit so that I could do more trails and go longer miles. And so that's what really inspired me to start working out with you. And so I think, you have to start somewhere. And so even if it's, a neighborhood trail or just encouraging everyone of any, body shape, size, age, to just get out on the trail and just take it one trail at a time.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Heather, thank you so much for coming on board today for this call. I think this has been so awesome just hearing a bit more about your journey and obviously a long-term journey at that. And as I sort of said before, I really do hope this sort of like your words and your story here can resonate with a few people who may be going through a similar journey or facing similar setbacks or whatever it is. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been such a pleasure and I really appreciate you you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.